Be able to do so now.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Stephanie. I will get this. All right. Okay. So it always takes just a couple minutes to get technologically set, but welcome to everybody for our Sales for Non-Sales People Part 3. I loved last week. We actually had people putting in the chat where they're joining from. So I would love to know kind of where you guys are right now. Dan and I are in Seattle, where miraculously we have sun today. So we're going to be enjoying actually getting outside, which we haven't always been able to do. But as Stephanie mentioned, today's session is one in a 4-part series covering the core principles of our program, Connected Selling. We've done this with a focus on sales skills for non-sellers. We know that successful sellers are able to build strong relationships and connections, which help people to drive their business, right? The stronger your relationships are, the easier your sell will be. Sales is important for every business. And as a small business owner, which we know many of you are, we know you will definitely find yourself in a sales function at some point in the process. Whether it's actually selling your product or your services to clients, maybe it's talking to investors or talking to potential partners. Strong relationships are what will set you apart and drive your success. We know that it's the relationship that drives the deal, not the deal that drives the relationship. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So as Stephanie mentioned, we have 2 other parts of our series, one focused on authenticity and trust. If you weren't able to join us, the link to authenticity is in the chat and the trust will be coming. We encourage you to watch those, but you don't really have to watch those to get something out of today. But I do think it will give you a better understanding of the whole Connected Selling program. So go back and watch those if you haven't watched them. Our goal for this whole series is really to leave you with some new ideas on how to build strong relationships in the workplace and get you started on your way to developing the skills that you need to grow your business. The great thing is some of these skills will translate into your personal life too, but we're going to focus on building your sales skills. So quick overview again, if you haven't seen the last couple, quick review of who we are. I'm Terry Hintz. I have over 20 years of experience working in sales management, and training. A lot of that time has been spent in the media space, working for tech companies, media companies, and startups. I even spent 8 years working for the master of living your best life, Oprah Winfrey. Just over a year ago, we started our sales training and consulting business here with my partner, Dan, who you'll meet in a minute. My passion has always been in teaching and helping others from an early age, really. And I've paired that with my skills in sales to create the basis of Trestle and our Connected Selling program. In the past year, I've focused a lot of time working with startups and people who aren't your typical salespeople, doing one-on-one coaching and consulting, which brings us here today.
Welcome everyone from all around the country. My name is Dan Russell. My experience includes 25 years of frontline sales as well as executive management. My career has spanned traditional media, digital media, real estate development, and the ad tech industry. I've built high-performing sales teams as well as developed and deployed training strategies to bridge the divide between traditional and digital media companies. My clients have included Comcast, ABC, Univision, the LA Times, as well as other mainstream media outlets. As an ad tech executive, I've provided strategic direction to the streaming media and search industries. And as a small business owner, I've developed multiple residential properties in the Seattle market, wearing a number of hats: architect, general contractor, finance, and sales. And today, as the co-founder of Trestle and co-author of our Connected Selling program. In today's session, we want to focus on the Connected Selling core principle of understanding perspective, right? We'll talk about what perspective is and how you can move into others' perspectives as a way to not only drive deeper connection, but also bring that sale and move that sale forward. We'll work on challenging assumptions as a way to get closer to the shared truth. In this process, it allows you to understand what your client's perspective is and how we can challenge the assumptions that we may have about their business. And we'll give you some immediate actions that you can take today to start integrating these skills and understanding perspective. Let's get started. Here's a quick reminder about the core message of connected selling and what we've discussed so far, right? At its core, the connected selling philosophy is about connecting your emotional intelligence with your IQ, right? It comes down to building empathy and understanding what your client's going through and how you can create and craft sales proposals to really work with that perspective. IQ may get your foot in the door, but your EQ will determine how far you go, right? And so that increased empathy is what leads to deeper connections and greater relationships and ultimately increased sales and success, right? And in terms of authenticity, no one is you. That is your superpower. Authenticity helps to increase our EQ by building confidence and increasing the effectiveness of our communication. We live in a trust economy, and we know that trust, not money, is the currency of business. Ultimately, people buy from people they trust. In many cases, it's the number one reason, right? So when they trust you implicitly, you'll be an advisor, and that connection is what will help you close that business.
Great. So let's talk about perspective. Authenticity and trust, the first two sessions, really focus on you as an individual. And our program really talks about how to be successful in sales, you want to lead from you as an individual first, and then take into account everything else around you. So once you can understand yourself, then you can start to connect with others. And understanding perspective is what's going to help you better understand your client and create that deeper connection. So we're going to try to do this exercise. We usually do this in a in-person workshop, but I'm going to try to do it here. And I'd love for you guys to bear with me and go along with this. But you can either stand up or you can sit in your chair. But what I want you to do is, I'm going to do mine so you can see it in the video frame, no matter how tiny it is. But I want you to point your finger up to the sky and just point one finger, point it up to the sky and move your finger in a clockwise circle. Okay. So when you look up, it's clockwise. Is everybody doing that? Dan, you can do it too. So look up and point your finger in a clockwise direction. So everybody knows your finger is going clockwise. Now what I want you to do is bend your arm at the elbow, but keep moving your finger in the clockwise circle, but bend your arm and just pull it down so that you're looking down on top of your finger. Is it still moving in a clockwise direction or is it counterclockwise? For me, it's counterclockwise. And if you did it right, it's counterclockwise for you too. And so what that's telling you is that even though there's a truth, you're moving counterclockwise, here you're moving counterclockwise, that there's not just one truth, there's just different perspectives, right? So it depends on how you look at it. This picture on the slide, I think you guys can stop moving if you haven't, but this picture on the slide, I think really resonates this as well. You know, the quote behind this is, just because you are right does not mean I am wrong. You just haven't seen life from my perspective. And that's what we're going to talk about. And that's what we're going to focus on today.
So let's consider the definition of perspective, right? What is it? Perspective is a way of viewing things that depends on one's experience, thoughts, and personality, right? Studies have shown that we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are, right? Our perspective is shaped by experience, our thoughts, and can be defined as our own point of view. And you know, Terry's going to have a different point of view than I am because she's had a different life experience. We were talking about this earlier. It's like, if you work in the sales department, you know, you may be really eager to get out to market with a product, but you want to make sure that that product's fully baked before you start offering it to a client. Whereas someone on the marketing team may be really easy, or sorry, the product team may be really eager to get something to market because they want to test it. They want to make sure that it operates and functions the way they expect it to, right? So two different perspectives. As a salesperson, I'm going to protect myself and I'm going to sell what I know works. A product team, their perspective may be they just want to test the product and see if it's effective and resonates in the marketplace, right? So for any given situation, there can really be a lot of different perspectives. Yours is just one in a sea of many, right? Your personal power lies in your willingness to listen and acknowledge someone else's perspective. Think about it. When you put yourself in your customer's shoes, right? When you walk a mile in their shoe, right? That really gives you an understanding not only of what they're trying to accomplish from a business perspective, but also emotionally about what's going on around them when they're trying to negotiate this complex sale. And you don't have to agree, but acknowledging goes a long way in building sincerity and trust, as well as showing your willingness to learn more about them, right? And so the opposite of understanding perspective is egocentrism, only seeing your own view. When you can only see your own point of view, you're really not showing empathy and you're not building trust, right? It's a one-sided perspective and it's not taking into account what other people might be experiencing as well. We easily could have discussed perspective in our trust segment, right? Because listening and understanding someone else's perspective goes a long way in helping to build that trust.
So what are the benefits of understanding perspective? And there's definitely a lot of them, especially in a sales situation. So first is it creates a more complete understanding of the situation, right? It's going to open up your own understanding because you're going to bring in other people's perspectives. Maybe it solidifies your perspective that you already have, and maybe it causes you to adjust your perspective. You know, have you ever thought something like, oh, I guess I never thought of it that way. Yeah, that makes sense. So the more you can look at other people's perspectives, can you get a really deeper and more complete understanding of the situation. It also improves communication and clarity. We talked last week about how critical those two things are to building trust. So when you can improve that, it's going to improve your trustworthiness as well. But it also really gives you the language that you need to shape your conversations. When you can understand where someone else is coming from, you can pull that language and those terms into what you're talking about. And it's going to allow you to, the next one, build empathy and connection, right? You're showing that you understand the other person's thoughts and feelings. And that ultimately is going to build empathy and that connection. It also creates that common ground we talked about, right? And the fourth thing, it creates influence. This is really important in a sales function, is you want to be able to influence the other person and provide value to them. And only when you can really understand the emotions behind their perspective and what their perspective is, can you then drive them down the path that you want them to go, right? So when you want to influence them, the best way to do that, understand where they're coming from, okay? Understand their perspective. And finally, you know, finding those mutually beneficial solutions to both of you. You know, in a sales relationship, what you want to do is not just get someone to buy your product, but find the solution that's going to benefit you both. Maybe that benefit is you get money and they get your solution, but you want to find that mutually beneficial solution. And you want to use perspective to create that roadmap to get there. It's really key in negotiation. We talk about this a lot in our coaching sessions, is how to negotiate, and understanding perspective is critical there. It's going to allow you to solve those problems and conflicts as they come up. And then ultimately, as we talk about with connected selling, when you can understand someone's perspective, it's going to help you build that better relationship. It's going to drive connection, and you're going to have empathy, because not only are you caring about their opinions, but you're caring about their emotions and how you got there. Ultimately, it's then going to help you address their needs appropriately, right? And you can use that to describe and expose their challenges and how your solution answer is the answer to that. So it's important to remember, it does not matter what you think. It matters that you understand what they think. That's the importance to understanding perspective. So how do we do it? That's the big question. Now we know the why. So how do we do it? It's important to remember, as Dan mentioned, that your perspective is one in a sea of many. So it's really important to find out what those other perspectives are. The way that we do this is through challenging assumptions. We make assumptions all the time. We do it without even knowing we're doing it, right? We create a story about things throughout our whole lives. You know, I heard this one story about someone who heard someone in their office yelling to the phone at a customer, and immediately you think, oh, why are they doing that? That's awful. but then come to find out, oh, well, the customer was hard of hearing. And so that's why the person was yelling. So we create these stories and assumptions all the time. And when you can challenge those, it's going to allow you to really understand the relationship and the conversation that you're having at a deeper level. And it's really important to do this because assumptions cause us to act differently. And maybe they make it so we do something we shouldn't do, or maybe we don't do something we should do. And it causes distress in the relationship. So here's an example of how an assumption caused a problem for a salesperson. I was recently in the market for a laptop for my kids, and I went to a big box retailer to ask some questions about the laptops, but I was going to buy one. I just wanted to make sure we had all of the features that we needed. And towards the end of the conversation, well, it wouldn't have been the end of the conversation, but the salesperson turned to me and asked, "Do you need to ask your husband about this?" And I was kind of thrown back, and I'm like, no. And I walked away, right? So talk about the danger of assumptions. He assumed that I needed to consult my husband because maybe I didn't work and make my own money, or maybe I couldn't make technology decisions on my own. But ultimately, he missed out because I was ready to buy. And had he just taken a few minutes to listen and ask some questions and think about my perspective, he would have had an easy sale. Right? So there's dangers in acting on your assumptions. And that's the critical point about why you want to do this. So how can you do it? Stay curious. I love this. I tell all my coaching clients, put this on a sticky note on the side of your computer. Stay curious, ask questions, and really listen. We talk about global listening. We'll actually talk about this next week, but that's the emotions that are behind the words. So you're not just listening to the words, you're listening to everything around that. And when you can understand the emotions of the person behind that, behind the words, that's where you can create that area of influence. Open-ended questions are going to get you as much information as possible. Again, we'll talk about this next week, but it's also going to allow you to find the path and the direction you want to go. In the media space, we did a video series at my last company for a client, and it really didn't perform well based on all of our benchmarks. And we were really nervous, and we could have gone in and offered make goods or said, "Oh, I'm really sorry." But when we got on the phone with the client, the first thing we did was we asked them questions. What did you think? How did it go? Well, it turned out the client was like super happy with the campaign, and based on their benchmarks, it performed really well, and they loved it and they shared it. And so that's just a really good example of how asking questions and staying curious is going to change your course of action potentially. And in this case, it helped save the relationship from maybe going down a bad path of them saying, "What do you mean it didn't perform well?" Right? So that can happen too. You want to ultimately gain clarity, right? Curiosity is what drives clarity. We know the importance of clarity and trust. And you want to make sure that you understand, or what you think you understand is correct. When you can clarify the assumptions, they no longer are assumptions, they're facts or they're truth, right? So asking questions and being clear on what the solution is or what the answer is really where you can get the most benefit. Dan, I think you have a really good example of this in your personal life.
Yeah, I had a call from my adult son the other day, and he was excited to tell me that he found a job after, having lost several of them. And he is working as a bellman at a hotel. And he went on to tell me that they had trained him on valet parking. And I was like, trained you on valet parking? How was that possible? He's like, well, they asked me to go out to the motor lobby and to take tickets and to, help with the valet parking. And I was flabbergasted. I'm like, Mario, how is that possible? You don't have a driver's license. And he was like, Dad, I wasn't driving the car. They were teaching me how to fill out the frickin' form. And I was like, okay, well, there you have it, right? So I had jumped to this conclusion that he was actually driving a car, that the company was irresponsible for letting him drive a car. And here he was basically learning the basics of filling out the ticket.
And I love that example, one, because it talks about how this challenging assumptions is important in your personal life as well as your professional life. But it also, again, some of that stress that Dan had, and I know he didn't really show how frustrated he was when he told that story, but I know there was a lot of frustration and emotion behind it. And once he got that clarity, all of a sudden it became much easier and much less stressful. And so when you can do this, when you challenge assumptions through asking questions and staying curious, and gaining clarity, it allows you to get closer to the quote unquote truth, right? We already know through the finger example that there's not just one truth, right? And truth includes feelings behind the words as well as what the words are, right? So it's important to remember that not only also are you and the person you're talking to, your perspectives are important, but there might be other people's perspectives that are important, right? If you're talking to a client, maybe the CEO has a different perspective, or the CFO, or whoever holds the purse strings for the deal that you're trying to do. So if you can think about what are all the perspectives involved, of everyone involved, and not just the person you're talking to, that's where you get closer to this, combined truth. You can look at what are those common denominators from everybody's perspective, and that's the core of what you're looking for. So let's think about how you do this in action.
So figuring out what the assumptions are and then seeking truth around it, right? So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to ask ourselves, what is it we're assuming? So consider this scenario, right? You've had a meeting with a client, perhaps you've had two, and they've expressed some interest. They've said, yes, we'd be willing to meet more. We'd like to see a proposal. And then all of a sudden they go radio silent, right? So no communication, you're doing everything you can. You're making a phone call, you're texting, you're sending an email, nothing from them in response, right? So what are the assumptions that we're making in that moment about that person or that situation? So the first one might be, they don't like me, right? My insecurities come right to the front. They don't like me. The second one might be, they don't like the product. Maybe they are worried that our company isn't as stable as some have indicated. Maybe they don't like the management team, right? There's a lot of different things that may be going on. Maybe they're homesick. Maybe they have a child or a parent that they're caring for. Maybe they're on vacation, right? So what is it we're assuming about that person in that situation? And let's make sure that we sort of be clear on all of this various assumptions that might be happening. So why are you assuming it, right? Well, again, let's talk about that insecurity. I'm assuming they don't like me, so that's because I'm insecure. Maybe I'm assuming that they're on vacation, but the reality is they might be sick. So why am I making that assumption? Well, maybe that in the past they've reached out when they were on vacation, whereas opposed to now, again, they're radio silent in their communication. And what might be some other reasons for why they are being radio silent? Well, maybe they've lost their job. Maybe they're no longer working there, right? That might be one assumption. Maybe someone else is actually making the decisions and they're really just the messenger. And so maybe there are some other people involved in that process that you need to have a conversation with in order to clarify and make sure you understand what that combined truth looks for. And then you want to ask yourself, how does this change my course of action, right? So if I think they don't like me, well, maybe I just don't respond. Maybe I throw my hands up in the air and I don't make an attempt to reconnect or get the thing back on course, right? That might be a way that I respond and react. And in reality is, if they're on vacation and that's how I respond, and then they never hear from me again, then they're wondering what happened to me, right? So these are all ways to challenge those assumptions. And it's really important, A, to acknowledge that we do all make assumptions, right? It's really easy to think that if we jump to a conclusion that it's true, well, it may not be. That person may not be sick. They may not be on vacation. They may have lost their job. There's a lot of different aspects that are a part of challenging those assumptions.
And I think too, it's important to acknowledge the feelings, your own feelings, as well as maybe somebody else's, but the feelings around why you're making those assumptions, right? I think that can really be liberating, even just to understand, wow, I'm making this assumption because I'm insecure. This has nothing to do with the client. It has everything to do with me.
Sure.
And so looking at that can even just be liberating, like, oh, okay, that's silly. I'm making this assumption because it's about me and not about them.
And you're getting in the way of the opportunity, right? As
Right.
opposed to stepping aside and responding and reacting without that emotional component.
Exactly. Yeah. So what are some immediate action items that you can take today and you can walk away with? You know, given we know that understanding perspective provides several benefits and creates a deeper connection to your clients, let's talk about what some things are that you can do today in your daily conversations to understand perspective. The first one is act based on fact, not assumption. I like that the word act is in the word fact. And so just remember, this is going back to challenging those assumptions that you're making and making sure you are acting based on fact. Are you making the assumption that they don't like you because they didn't respond? Again, is that fact? Do you know that? Only when you can really ask the questions to get deeper and get that clarity will you know if that's true. And I think it's really important to think about, you know, how you respond and your course of action. If your course of action is affected by your assumption, you really need to think about that and dig deeper to find out the answer to that, because that could potentially hurt your business in a bad way that doesn't need to happen, right? So before you take action or non-action, think of all those assumptions and then find out which one it is. And I think it's really important here too to say, you know, don't be afraid to ask those direct questions. You know, what is the reason for X, Y, or Z? If you make the assumption, you have to be willing to ask the questions that is going to get you the information that you need to know whether your assumption is true or not. And then you can act based on fact. So the second one is don't answer, ask. I love this. And I'm going to challenge all of you with this. When someone asks you a question, instead of just answering the question, if you know the answer, think about why they're asking you the question. Perhaps you can gain more information about their perspective from not answering the question, right? So if someone asks you, hey, can I move this deal from December to January? Maybe it's an easy answer of a yes or a no. But instead of answering yes or no, find out why they're asking. Maybe they actually really want to do it. You know, they want to do a workshop in December, but they don't have budgets until January. Or maybe they have the budgets now, but they don't have the people in the office until January, whatever that's available. Maybe they're too busy until then. But if you're asking the question and you understand why before you answer yes or no, then you'll know whether or not maybe you're leaving money on the table. If you just say yes and they move it to January when actually you could have billed in December, you just left that money on the table and potentially lost that revenue for the quarter. So don't answer, ask, find out why they're asking the question, because that will really get you deeper into their perspective and why they're doing what they're doing. The next one is prepare for difficult conversations. So before you go into a conversation, if you think it's going to be difficult, you know, think about what are all the assumptions, you know, do the exercise that Dan walked through. What are the assumptions that I make? What are other possible reasons for them to be upset or whatever might happen? And if you've already thought through those reasons to each one of those, you're going to be prepared no matter what they say, right? And preparing for the conversations by having questions ready to go to gain clarity, so you know which assumption is true, as well as which possible solution is going to be right for you to propose to your client, is really going to help minimize frustration and move the relationship forward. Because that's the important thing with all of this, is you want to move the relationship forward. The next one is be flexible and empathetic, right? Our whole connected selling program is trying to encourage you to have empathy with your clients and flexibility. So remember, your perspective is one in a sea of many. You don't want to be egocentric. You want to listen to and understand where everybody's coming from. And just because you see things one way doesn't mean that's the same way that someone else is going to see it. It's important to share your own perspective and encourage others to do the same. Kind of like trust, it's reciprocal. When you can share how you feel and then ask someone, well, how do you feel about it? That's where you're going to get deeper connection and deeper understanding. Know that there's reasons and emotions behind perspectives. Again, as Dan mentioned, it's based on our life history and our past. So trying to find out where they're coming from and why they're coming from that angle can really get you deeper to understand, and ultimately will allow you to better influence the path that you go down with that client. So again, focus on asking the questions to get to the real why beneath the response. And next week, we will focus on actually pretty deeply on asking effective questions and listening, which is going to go hand in hand with what we have here today.
So that brings us to our key takeaways for today, right? Your perspective is one of many. Everyone has a perspective based on their own history, their own experiences, their own thought process. And it's important, especially in the sales arena, that we look at as many perspectives as possible, right? We want to consider the direct client that we're talking to. We want to consider maybe the finance, the CFO of that company. There are so many different perspectives that it's important that we take on in order to get to that combined shared truth that gets us to the end of the sale, right? Empathy is the key to understanding what other people are going through, what they're experiencing, where they're coming from, how they're experiencing the situation, both emotionally and then from a business perspective, right? And in doing so, we want to challenge assumptions. Challenging assumptions is about limiting what our own preconceived ideas might be and really opening up to what that combined truth is all about, right? Only once you've gone through the process of challenging those assumptions can you really get closer to that combined truth. And then, of course, perspective helps you understand your client's needs, right? It's through that questioning process that we are building, developing trust, creating stronger connections and stronger relationships. And it's those connections that will allow you to raise the bar on the opportunity to drive more revenue for yourself and your company, right? Empathy and perspective are critical in this journey.
So what next, right? Practice, practice, practice. We know that these are skills that take time to learn and master, just like habits. The more you can integrate these into your daily schedule and your daily conversations, the easier they'll be and the more naturally they'll happen. So we encourage you to take those immediate action steps to try doing that today. We also offer individual coaching, as I mentioned earlier, to keep you accountable and to answer questions along the way. We've been working specifically with small business owners over the last few months and have seen tremendous success in helping them grow their businesses. We do offer a free 30-minute one-on-one mentor session or coaching consultation to all WeWork members. So we encourage you to take advantage of that. If you want to access this, I know Stephanie was looking into that. And we can make sure that you get access to that, or our email is on the next page. So feel free to reach out to either Dan or I if you're interested in that. And finally, we look forward to seeing you next week, hopefully for our meaningful conversations where we'll dig into listening and effective questioning to drive positive conversations. So please reach out. Thank you, everybody.
So much.